You're listening to the Better Relationships After Baby podcast, where I believe things can actually be better than ever after having kids. But it takes intentional conversation, personal growth, and community to get there. I'm Chelsea Skaggs, life and relationship coach, fellow mom and wife, and lover of taboo topics. I'm here to give you insight, practical tools, and conversations to help your relationships survive and thrive through the big changes of parenthood. Let's get into today's episode. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Better Relationships After Baby. This episode is going to be a little bit different. It's a little experimental, and I am not coming to you with a lot of advice or a lot of how-tos. More so, I am coming to you to have a conversation that I've seen happening on my own social media, that I've seen happening in other places, and I just wanted to have a live conversation with our guest today about how we approach the reality that we have a lot of systematic issues in our society, a lot of issues that can tear or can pit men and women against each other, and for a lot of good reasons and for, a lot of hurt reasons. I've invited my new friend who has a similar passion as me, Fred, to be part of this conversation with me because we are both in this space of exploring. We're just going to explore together through this dialogue and have a conversation from both a male and female point of view on how we look at things like the patriarchal systems and collaborative relationships and teamwork and building a pathway that maybe makes a better way for us and for our kids and for our future generations. I thought of Fred immediately when I wanted to have this conversation because he is doing the work not only in himself, but also with other men. He is a fair play facilitator. He is working with an emphasis on supporting men in their relationships. And I'm going to let you, Fred, fill in a little bit more about what that looks like for you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, I love that you invited me to the conversation, and I want to invite the listeners to hang with us through this because it will be uncomfortable. And I think I've learned through the work that I do with other men, and the work that I've done and am still doing, to be honest, on myself, that being uncomfortable in conversation is not something that I think a lot of us have enough practice in. And so this is I look at it as another way for me to practice talking about a topic that I think a lot of men, especially men, are uncomfortable talking about the patriarchy, the systems that are in place, right? And one thing I want men who are listening, hopefully there are some men listening to this, is to recognize your defensiveness, because you will have it, and understand that defensiveness is often unprocessed shame. And I know that's a heavy topic to get into straight off the bat, but it's something you need to sit with and think about. And yeah, I guess that's where I would start is, try to have an open mind to this uncomfortable conversation we're about to have. Let's start with the post you made, because I think that's kind of where this whole thing started anyway. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So in my work, I'm typically working with both people in a couple, and most of the time my clients are heteronormative. So I'm working with a man, I'm working with the women. I work with them separately and together. And I have found that when I first became a mom, honestly, there were times that I just dreamed of a all women lesbian island where we could just escape men, because it's like, how the hell do we keep trudging through this? Over time, over the last 5 years or so, I've met a lot of really good men who are noticing that they don't want to operate in the patriarchal norms, that they want to be more hands-on in their family, that they want to be emotionally available and aware. And also that feels really scary because there's not a lot of modeling for that, and there's not a lot of safety for doing that. Now, does that mean they shouldn't buck up against it and just do it? No, it doesn't mean that. But I think I have developed a lot of grace or understanding over the last few years for the way that my anger towards men as an early mom has shifted to more of a frustration or this like, God, what do we even do about the big picture, about the structural implications of all of this? And so I created a post that talked about how the patriarchy also holds down men, how it makes it, there's not a lot of modeling. There's not a lot of support, even structurally, workplace, all of these pieces. What I didn't expect was kind of the rising anger and pushback from women who say, well, it's not my job. That's not my job. And interestingly, that was interesting for me because I reread the text, I reread things, and I'm like, in no place did I say, let's teach the men. But that's how it felt. And I think for women, that's how it's felt for a long time. The only solution, the only way this is going to get better is if we hold their hand and we give them a gold star every time they change a diaper, and they get all of this praise. So I'm sitting with that tension of, for me personally, I do think men have to be the leaders in pulling this shit together. And I think if we continue this like pitting against each other, we're not going to get anywhere. And so I'm really internally battling with what does it look like as a woman to not take on the labor of men, but to be a partner that says, if and when you're willing to step into this and do the work, we're not going to make fun of you. We're not going to tell you it's too late. We're not going to tell you, that you're not invited here anymore. That's where I'm sitting right now after creating that post and interacting with people who've had a variety of different reactions to that.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into some of the specific comments you got. But I will say I read through I don't know how many, 20 plus comments and the responses to those comments. So I did spend a lot of time kind of like just really thinking about the collective response to that post. And there was quite a bit of anger, which is understandable, right? From mostly the female side. And interestingly, not so much anger from the male side, where the post really should make men angry. And I think the reason why men aren't so angry is they do benefit from the system in certain ways, and they don't always notice the harm that it's doing. And that's kind of, I like having these types of conversations, and I like reading posts like yours because it brings more awareness to that. One of the things I think is a huge miss on men's part, and what I think a lot of the women commenting were sort of pointing out, is that telling men that they're responsible is not the same as blaming them for everything. And so there's a difference between like holding power and being empowered to make change, right? And when women come at the conversation with, oh, well, men built the system, so men are responsible for dismantling that system, right? I agree with that. And it doesn't need to be taken personally. I think men read that comment and they take it as if, they literally built the system. It's like, of course I didn't. As a man, I did not have a hand or a part in creating this system. I was born in 1978. I was born a man. I didn't create the system. I was born into it. And so when men read that sentence, they're like, well, it's not my problem, or it's not my fault, right? It's like, we're talking about the wrong thing. And we get caught in this, in the work that I do with men and women, because I do coach some couples as well. we get caught in this blame. I call it the blame and shame cycle, and it happens in marriages and relationships, right? Where
Mhm.
we tend to focus on who's at fault, and that's where you start to argue and try to win an argument, and you focus on winning
Yeah.
versus partnering. And I believe the future is partnership. And so it was interesting to see how there was just so many people kind of like wiping their hands clean of it, both from both genders, from male and female
Mhm.
perspective. And I don't mean to say
Mhm.
there's only two genders, because I don't believe that personally, but
Yep.
from men and women, there was a collective kind of like, well, it's not my responsibility. So you have women saying it's not my responsibility, and that's fair in a way. And then you have men saying it's not my responsibility, which is, I believe, unfair. But I think the problem is no one knows how to solve the problem,
Yeah.
right? And so when we don't know or have answers, or answers aren't easy to come by, especially in this day and age, we give up because we feel helpless. And so towards the
Mhm.
end of this conversation, I'd like to I took some notes, and I'd like to give people some tips on what they can do, especially men, what men can do so they
Yeah.
don't feel so helpless. So if you're open to that, I would like to do that later at
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Thank you. I wrote that down so that I don't forget. Yeah, I think that is so interesting. Like, where does the change happen? And I think that's where I'm holding tight to this glimmer of hope. That might be real. That might just be me wanting it to be real, but that empowered partnerships can make this change. And I don't know that we can have empowered partnerships if we are divisive in our relationship, right? And pointing the fingers and looking for the blame. The only thing I can come up with is that both partners are responsible for working on themselves, healing themselves, looking at their place in society, and being willing to challenge that or change something. And as I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking there are examples. So, for example, a big part of my husband and I's story is that we were very into the church and ministry for a while, and then we completely left it. We have deconstructed our faith. We have just a lot that changed a lot in our lives. That was not my husband's responsibility or his thing to hold, but I don't know if I could have gotten through the healing and the unlearning and the reintegration without his support. And I'm not sure if that's a parallel. Again, I don't want to say it's any wife's or woman's or partner's job. I also just wonder how much all of us need to heal and grow, and how much better we can do that when it's safe in our relationship to do so. Recognizing that I'm speaking directly to people who have relationships that have signs of being able to grow and being able to stay together. And I also want to recognize that that is not every relationship. Some people are in relationships that are not going to change and grow and flourish and support them. Uh, and that's, I guess I have to hold that those people are going to interact with things too, even though that's not who I'm trying to speak to.
Yeah, I mean, clearly everyone's story is different. And I think, again, I think we talked about it before you hit record, but I think it's important to say out loud, like, neither one of us is coming at this conversation with like, we have all the answers and this is the perfect
Mm-hmm.
solution, and this will dismantle, smash the patriarchy, whatever you want. That's not at all what this conversation is for. It is an exploration of having an
Yeah.
open conversation about these serious things that are happening in that affect all of our lives in specific ways, some really painful ways. And like you said, like, some people aren't safe enough in their own relationships to have these types of conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, and you understand that, and again, want to honor that there have been plenty of women who have been hurt by men in all sorts of ways, some really awful ways, killed by men. I mean, I don't want to
Mhm.
shy away from saying out loud that there is a problem with violence, male violence against
Mhm.
women and girls. And so while we talk about the system and relationships specifically, which is what I think we'll focus on in this conversation, there are some really serious undertones to this
Mhm.
conversation that, when we say it's men's responsibility, it absolutely is men's responsibility to call out bad behavior, to
Mhm.
improve, to, like you said, heal and improve themselves. It's not Sarah, my wife Sarah. It's not her responsibility. She should support me, right? But it's not her responsibility to heal me. It's not her responsibility to, um, you know, make me do the work, right? Like that's the work that I'm responsible for, and I need to take
Mhm.
initiative, and I need to find community of men to talk with, and all of those things. And I'm building that for other men as well. Uh, Small plug, but if you're open
Yo,
to it.
that's why you're here.
So yeah, I'm building a community. I'm starting with small group coaching first, and then
Yeah.
hopefully we'll build a wider community. But yeah, if any men that are listening are interested in a safe space to kind of talk about a lot of these hard things, that you're not comfortable talking to your wife about, because clearly that is difficult to do, would love to invite you into that.
Yeah. From your personal and professional experience, what makes this, I don't want to say harder. That's maybe a cop out. What makes men less likely to enter these spaces and challenge the way things have been, even if it's perhaps not how they want to live?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from what I've seen, from the conversations I've had, from my own experience as well, I think what makes it really hard is that feeling of helplessness, and also that feeling of feeling guilt or shame around these issues. And
Mm-hmm.
when we haven't, and the other thing that I think is really important to talk about to answer your question is conditioning, because we are, men, at least my generation of men, and I believe it's still happening, to be honest, because I know, like, the younger
Mm-hmm.
generation, people talk about them doing better, and they may be doing better, but I don't think it's like healed in a full capacity. I mean, we have
Right.
guys like Andrew Tate out there,
Right.
convincing men to do bad things. So it's definitely not like we've solved this problem with the next generation. So men that
Mm-hmm.
grew up in my generation, and we're still teaching our boys and men um, to not feel, to be in a
Mm-hmm.
rigid box. I know, I forget who started it, but the man box culture is something that, if you're a man, you should Google. But it's this idea that we have to fit into a mold. And if we don't fit into this
Yeah.
specific definition of what someone else decided was masculinity, then we're not man enough. We're not a real man. And I see really good men, really good people, or from what from at least as far as I know, they're good men, still using language like saying, like, if you want to be a real man, like, you have to do X,
Mm-hmm.
Y, Z. And I will, if you ever catch me saying something like that, please call me out on it, because I don't believe in that. I don't believe there's such a thing as a quote unquote real man. I think you are who you are, authentically human. And I think we put way too much emphasis on,
The,
this. It ends up being a performance, because you want to fit in so badly that you end up doing things that aren't even in alignment with who you are at your core. And I see it all the time, and I've also lived that pain myself. So
yeah. Yeah, when you said that, it made me think of something I haven't thought in a long time. But my husband is very gentle, kind, intentional, empathetic. And I truly believe I fell in love with him because of those things. And also recognize and confess that there was a point where I thought, oh God, like, is he manly enough? Is he like those things maybe kind of scared me early on in our relationship. We've been married for 13 years now, but I think it was some, comments from friends and other people. Had an ex-boyfriend show up and have things to say. But even as a woman, right, I was conditioned to think of a certain level of manliness. And I just own, that there are probably times before I kind of did this unraveling work and we did it in our relationship, but I probably perpetuated the patriarchal dream because, especially growing up in the church, like there were these very clear standards of what a man needed to be and what he needed to provide. And I bought that for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other side of the shame, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're feeling helpless and not knowing how to solve the problem, and you do possess some really great qualities that are considered more feminine qualities, right? If you start to come out to say some of those things or show up in those ways in the world, you do, like you said, you do get ridiculed sometimes. You do get judged by other men a lot. I mean, also women, and I thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that story. But yeah, like it's that's scary as well for men, but I think this is important. So like we need to stop this whole nonsense of worrying about what other people think about us. And I know you've probably heard
Mm-hmm.
that a million times, especially as parents. We tell our kids the same thing, right? Like, don't worry about what other people think. And here we are worrying about what other people think about us. So we're teaching our
Yeah.
kids with words, but not so much with actions. And our kids will model our behavior more than they will model what we tell them. And so I think it's really
Yeah.
important to work through some of that deep stuff that is, again, like this is the type of work you you can do in solitude, if that
Mm-hmm.
suits you. I don't think there's a wrong or right way to do this work. There is, I think it's a beneficial way to do it in community with other men because it's empowering. It feels great that you have other men aligned with those same pains and those same conversations. But it doesn't mean you can't do it alone. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's also important to point out that you're not a bad man for not knowing how to do this. You are responsible, though. You are
Mm-hmm.
responsible for learning. So
Mm-hmm.
you we keep making excuses, and I say we as a collective, and those excuses are stories that were written by our own fears and insecurities. And I would like to say out loud, because this was important for me on my journey. One of my mentors said out loud on a podcast, I am insecure. And I felt so like a weight lifted off my shoulders when I heard a leader who I respected in the world talk about how insecure he was. And it wasn't about money either, which I thought was because he was successful in that regard. And I really felt seen in that moment. And so for any, like, I will admit, like, I'm still working through some of my own insecurities, and I was very insecure, at the beginning of this journey, and that insecurity is what drove my daily actions at the time. And so I think it's really important to move away from some of these things that are holding back our true selves and our true identity that again, collectively, we've forced out because society told us to. And then we're not
Mm-hmm.
showing up as our authentic selves in our own relationships, in our own lives. And we just chase the wrong things.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I have a couple different thoughts and directions here, but you have used the word shame quite a few times. And I wonder if you would want to elaborate a little bit on why that feels like such a profound part of this story journey.
Almost every woman I talk to in a relationship with a man, or every man I'm able to talk to who's open enough to share this, is
Mm-hmm.
insecure. They'll say
Mm-hmm.
their partner's insecure, or their partner will actually admit that out loud in private, in a private conversation, not on a podcast. Uh, but But what's ultimately at the core of that is their guilt and their shame, and it doesn't necessarily have to
Yeah.
be around the system of patriarchy. It may just be, something that happened long ago or something they never processed through. Um, but what it shows up at in relationships is defensiveness. And so every
Mm,
single, and I mean every, like I don't think I've met a couple where the male partner especially, because we all have it, women have this as well, but I think it's predominantly male issue is this defensiveness where your partner will bring you something to anything really. It doesn't even have to be that serious. It can be, but it could also be like, why are the eggs left out on the counter type of stuff. And it's
mhm,
immediate, defensive roadblock,
mhm,
build a wall. I didn't, gaslighting. If it's really serious, like that's not even what happened. All the things that we catch ourselves saying that aren't helpful, and it's really just unspoken grief. It's really unprocessed shame. And I grew up Catholic. I don't practice faith anymore. But for those who maybe have grown up Catholic, there's a very common saying of Catholic guilt, because we are taught to feel bad about just being human, let alone
mhm.
male or whatever. So I think it's just really, I mean, it can go really deep. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of therapy. I think it's really important for men to say out loud as well in
Yeah.
public, like, therapy is helpful. You should go get therapy. I think, and again, not telling you what to do, it's your life and it doesn't work for everybody. I understand that. But I've benefited a lot from going and talking to a professional. And I think a lot of men believe that's weak, and I would like to say
Mm,
it's not. I would like to tell you it's
yeah.
brave and it's courageous. So,
Yeah.
but I bring up shame a lot because I think it's real, and I think it's important that men are witness to their own insecurities and witness to their own defensiveness and admit out loud, like, there's something deeper there. It's not just this surface level stuff. Like, you haven't processed through something, or maybe many things, because it's uncomfortable, frankly, and it's hard. And that's why I say, like, do the work wherever you do it, because it's really important for your relationships. And when we talk about relationships, I wrote a post on Instagram the other day, like, do this for you. Like, don't do this. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, you don't have to do this for not to say like your partner doesn't deserve it and your kids don't deserve that you do this work. They do. But ultimately you're doing it for yourself, to have a healthy, you know, inner dialogue, inner monologue, inner talk about how amazing you're doing, instead of talking about how
Mhm.
shitty you feel.
Yeah. And I will just, double plug therapy because I think in my own marriage, we found, and I believe my husband would be okay with me sharing this, like when he started going to therapy, it gave him, I wasn't responsible, right, for the healing he was doing, for carrying that emotional labor. Like he literally sought out a place to do that. And in tandem, the other thing that I think drastically improved our relationship was that he went out on a limb and started reaching out to other men in our circle, when things got hard. And that was a little bit awkward at first for both of us, like, oh gosh, everyone's gonna know my husband's weak, my husband's struggling, and for him, these people are gonna know I don't have it all together. And again, that's not an excuse. This is you can push through it, right? Like Fred's pushed through it, my husband Mike's pushed through it, many men have pushed through it. And not to say that you are perfect examples, like we're all on our journey. But having that, opening up the conversation. I always say that one of the biggest breakthroughs is just getting things out of your brain and out into a place where you can work with it. And I think that's really the power of therapy, coaching, groups, friendships that go beyond the surface level of watching basketball games and eating wings together. There's a lot that can happen. And I guess that's why I keep holding on to this hope that we can make it okay for those things to exist, for those vulnerabilities to be present, for those conversations and kind of even, friendships among men to become something that is a catalyst for change. And that is both individual responsibility of a man to step up and do those things and get out of their comfort zone and say, you know what, like my dad might not think that this is manly, that I'm going to therapy and I'm talking to my friends about my feelings or big things, or I'm, I'm keeping the kids all weekend without a list of what to do. Maybe your dad wouldn't think that's super cool, and I'm willing to do it. And that is, I think, how we get to a place of more collective change of like, oh, I wish we didn't have to get to a place of, oh, this is okay, this is normal, we're normalizing this. But everything I've learned about psychology and sociology is we need the normalization process, and that starts with the individuals.
Yeah, well said. I think a lot of men suffer in silence. They like, to your point
Yeah.
about male friendships, like they don't, especially as they get older, it's harder and harder to have and maintain and prioritize male friendships. All the more reason to focus on that. I think this, it doesn't have to be a group coaching experience either. It can just be like you go play pickleball, and then afterwards you have like real conversations, right? Like you have a meal
Yeah.
and talk about real shit, and not complaining about your wives, but actually like
Mm-hmm.
really healing through those conversations, right? Because that's complaining is not going to get you anywhere you want to be. I don't think. I mean, unless you're trying to get divorced, trying to end your relationship, then by all means. But I do think it's important to point out too, with suffering, right? We talk about, and I say suffering in silence literally because I watched my dad do that, and I know many men have done that, where they hold everything in because of the shame around admitting out loud, to your point, that it seems weak to, whether it's your dad, your friends, the world, yourself, if that's your belief. And I really would like to invite you to challenge that belief and really sit with that, because is it really better to suffer in silence than to talk to someone about that suffering and maybe end some of that suffering? And then I'd also like to say that, like, for we can't mistake men's suffering, because men are, I don't want this to sound like men are the victims and so they just need to not do the other stuff. Like, we need to take actions.
Yeah.
So it's not just healing yourself and sitting and talking about suffering and then never doing other stuff, other things that actually matter. And so male suffering is not male innocence. The system is broken. It hurts men, it hurts women, but pain doesn't mean powerlessness. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can be hurt by something and then you could be responsible to change that thing and move forward. And so it's not, are men oppressed? It's what are you going to do about it? Do you want this generation to
Yeah.
be the one that makes changes? I do. And I hope there's more of people that think like that out there. Awareness is the first step. And then it's, okay, what do I do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you ready to share some of those things?
Yeah, because I do have to pick up my son. I got to leave at 2, and I think we're up on time, so we've got
We're
about
coming
10
up on
minutes.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I made
Let's
this
talk about
list. I made this list because I know I've felt this way. I've felt helpless, and I still sometimes do. Honestly, I don't have all the answers, but I'd like to invite you to consider some of these things for yourself if it aligns with who you are and if it's doable for you. But I think they're really simple, small lifts. We get caught up, and I say again, we, myself included in that, in this idea that we have to do this big thing. We have to change, like, it's a system, and how do we change a system? Like, oh, I got to wait till the next presidential election. Like, do I have to write to my senator? Like, all of these things, right? And that's not what this list is going to be. So this is a really simple, easy lift for you to do. The first thing is reframe what it means to provide. We've been told that being a provider means money, but your family also needs presence, it needs patience, it needs play, and it needs partnership. So redefine that for yourself and ask yourself, what are you providing? Are you providing energy and emotional availability, or are you just providing income? And start showing up where money can't. So that's the first one. Take full ownership at home. So you're not just a helper. This is for the husbands out there, the partners that live together, the male partners. Helping implies that you're doing someone else's job. Ownership means that you
Yeah.
see it, you do it, and you own the outcome. So this is the fair play stuff that I work in. I really think it's powerful for relationships. It's a really a power dynamic shift as well, because now you actually own and feel empowered at home, and you're not. I think I write this every so often. Like, if you're asking your wife for a list, then you're just an employee. And I know that might
Yeah.
hurt, but this is the truth, and the truth hurts. And I think it's important to face this stuff. Like, I was that guy, so I'm not judging at all. But shift into owning the home, or co-owning. Normalize dad mode in public and at work. So part of dismantling the system means letting other people see this new model. So if you hide it, you reinforce that it's not normal. So we need to decline meetings because of school functions. We need to say out loud that we're a dad and we have to be a parent right now. We need to talk about
Yeah.
parenting like it's a primary role, not a weekend hobby. And we need to take
Mm.
our any parental leave that we're lucky to have. We need to take it and make sure we're leading by that example instead of feeling shame around taking parental leave. Number 4 is talk about the load, not just the tasks. So learning phrases and language like mental load and emotional labor. Ask your partner what she might be holding in her mind all the time that you don't even realize. So having those conversations, disrupting male norms in conversations. So not necessarily being preachy, but modeling and calling guys out for stupid jokes that aren't helpful. Talking about, maybe they say out loud babysitting their kids. Like, no, you're not babysitting, bro. Like, you're a dad. Or if you talk about your wife as the old ball and chain, like, that's not what she is at all. I hope not, anyway. So no, like, I love showing up for my wife. I love showing up for my family. This isn't extra. I don't want an award. I don't need praise. This is just who I am, and this is how I believe things should be if you're in a partnership. But talking about that out loud in front of other men, committing to repair and not just apology. So the system doesn't teach men to own harm, and it doesn't teach men to repair trust. So we can be the generation that learns that. So if we mess up, which we all do, I do that at least once a week. Don't just say sorry. Say, what would help rebuild this trust? What would make this easier next time? What can we do better next time? It's not, again, get out of the whose fault it is. Don't feel if you feel shame or guilt, like, that's okay. It's a real feeling, but you have to heal that and get rid of it. So feel it and then move on to move forward. And then the last thing is build the blueprint with other men. I don't believe you're meant to do this work alone. That is the system telling us that we are. So create space to talk about fatherhood, create space to talk about partnership, and the pressure that we all feel. If it's not in a group that I'm building, find one that aligns with you. Like, I'm not for everybody, and that's totally fine. Find someone else. There are other men doing this work. There's also just friendships that you can build privately. There's groups in City Dads is in a lot of the major cities. They have dad groups. So find a group that you like and join it and show up and talk about the hard stuff. And that's the list. 7 things. I think they're all pretty doable. There's some major shifts in there, but I think it's something that we all could do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'll put some of those resources, like City Dads and just things that are out there, in the show notes. And I have a feeling this isn't the last time we're going to talk about this. I think there's a lot more to keep exploring. And I'm grateful.
I'm grateful too. And I really want to talk about the comments, because I think that'll be helpful. I know we don't have enough time to do that today, but because they're real. Those are real, raw genuine feelings. And I think like some of them are really confronting. And I think for men to face that without getting defensive, like I want to talk about that
Yeah.
because I
Okay.
don't think men
Yeah.
are um, comfortable to, they hear some of those things or read some of those things and they feel attacked. And I think we need to
Yeah.
really begin to dismantle that type of reaction.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I think we could do a whole episode focusing on where defense comes from, what role it has played, and what it looks like to choose a different path and engage in more curiosity and exploration and understanding. So let's put that on the calendar.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, I know I'm going to respect your time because you have a child to go pick up. And I hope that you have a wonderful weekend together.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, that was.
If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you take a minute to help spread the word. As a small business owner, shares and reviews go a long way. So share this episode with a friend, share it on your social media, and please leave a review if you haven't done so. This helps these messages get to more mamas, and you guys, that's how we change the world.